Leaving anywhere?
I think I got it.
In the courtroom. It'll be starting. No,
I'm great. How are you doing?
yeah, okay. I had a most of that course.
Somebody said that to me last night.
This may be. Play it by ear, I guess.
Is that your phone?
The appointed hour having come, I will go ahead and call this a special meeting of the Oak Ridge City Council to order. Mr. Clerk, if you would do roll call, please.
Councilmember Vaughn.
Here.
Councilmember Callison.
Here.
Councilmember Chip.
Here.
Councilmember Hensley.
Here.
Councilmember Hope.
Here.
Mayor Gooch.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Smith.
Here.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate everyone's attendance here tonight. For our citizens in the audience, I want to remind you that this is a special session, and your comments to council this evening will need to be directed at the agenda items that are on the special agenda. Having said that, Mr. Clerk, if you would read the first item of business, please.
A resolution approving a new professional services agreement with the Municipal Technical Advisory Service MTAS that shall accommodate the scope of work as outlined in resolution number 440/2015 and include the assumptions outlined in an MTAS email dated May 11, 2015 for review of the Oak Ridge Police Department with a particular focus on turnover, morale, and administrative policies for an estimated cost of $26,200.
I will move for approval of the resolution.
Second.
All right, it's moved and seconded. What I would like to do is propose 3 amendments. And we'll take them up one at a time. I would like to amend the resolution by deleting paragraph 2 in its entirety, paragraph number 2 in its entirety, and substituting in lieu thereof, designate the director of the personnel department as the point of contact for MTAS, and all interviews of current employees and former employees shall be scheduled by the director of personnel department based upon availability of MTAS consultants.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Mr. Hensley.
I'm sorry.
All right, Ms. Bowman.
Do I understand correctly that This special meeting has 3 items on the agenda.
There are three listed on the agenda, yes.
So is your amendment relative to item 1, 2, or 3?
It's resolution number 1 that was read by the clerk.
You referenced a second paragraph. There's only
Second
one.
paragraph in the resolution as well.
The second whereas.
On the same page.
Give you time to find the resolution. It's paragraph number 2 after the recitals.
Okay, so I'm looking at a resolution. That one's signed. That one's signed.
This is go to the, which should be toward the end of your documents that are online there.
Okay.
You got it?
Yeah, I'm on the right resolution now, so if we could slowly go back to
Sure.
your proposed amendment.
Sure.
please.
Let me restate that it's been moved and seconded to amend the resolution by deleting paragraph number 2 in its entirety and substituting in lieu thereof, designate the director of the personnel department as the point of contact for MTAS and all interviews of current employees, all current employees and former employees shall be scheduled by the Director of Personnel Department based upon availability of MTAS consultants. You recognize Ms. Hall?
When you say the second paragraph, are you saying the second whereas or the second paragraph of the entire resolution?
Number paragraph 2. It's at the
Here.
bottom of the page.
Okay.
It says designate the Director
Okay.
of Human Resources. This amendment that I'm proposing was discussed at our last work session in terms of a potential change in our process, both from the standpoint of the recommendation that MTAS would prefer that the city do the scheduling of interviews. We did discuss it at the work session, and there is some cost savings associated with that, and given the fact that all employees, both uniform and civilian, and former employees during the term of Chief Akagi will be given the opportunity to be interviewed. I have offered this amendment to the resolution. Mr. Hensley.
Yeah, actually, it's the same words, I believe, as paragraph number 3 in the April 30th letter from MTAS, is that right?
It is similar. It's not necessarily the same language.
Same
but it's
intent,
similar.
right?
Yes.
Sort of the same intent.
Same intent. Mr. Chin.
Matt, you indicated that there would be potential cost savings. How much of the cost savings would this be below the $26,000 figure that we have in the resolution?
I think that in the communications that was given or sent out, find it. It was in the email dated May the 11th at 6:17 p.m. MTAS reported relieving MTAS of the interview scheduling and having anything at all to do with the proposed email account would reduce the estimated fee by approximately $3,500.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on Amendment 1? If not, let's go to the board. The amendment is approved, 5 ayes and 2 nays. I would also like to offer a second amendment to the resolution by amending the resolution by deleting paragraph number 5 at the bottom of the resolution. Paragraph number 5 in its entirety, and substituting in lieu thereof the following. "20 interviews shall be conducted from a pool of current and former employees randomly selected by the consultants, with the randomly selected pool being interviewed before the remaining employees and former employees."
Second.
Amendment has been moved and seconded. Mr. Hensley?
Yeah, I saw that in all the verbiage that we got with the meeting agenda. Can somebody explain to me why MTAS wants to do the random selection and interview all the officers?
Mr. Hensley, in my discussions with Mr. Thomas at MTAS, he had, and in the communications that have been provided to you, they have been consistent in the opinion that it's their belief that it makes the review process stronger by having a random interview of a certain number of employees,
I guess.
or a pool of employees and former employees.
Well, I'm just talking out of curiosity here. If you're going to talk to all of them anyway, I don't see why random selection statistically makes a difference. But I mean, if they want to do it, since I favor MTAS doing it, I want to do it at the best of their ability. So if they think this makes it better, then I would support this.
That was their opinion, and on that basis, I'm bringing it to council for your consideration. Ms. Ball?
So item number 1 says the interview pool will consist of approximately 125 individuals. And that's to include current and past employees. So they're going to interview or attempt to interview everyone.
Yes, ma'am.
And then if this amendment passes, they will then randomly select from that same group of people,
Yes.
people to interview a second time.
No, they would interview those people first. They would interview the random pool first, is my understanding.
And their logic for that again is?
Well, according to them, they would prefer to have a random pool, start with a random pool, and then go forward with their interviews for the remaining employees and former employees.
Well, since the idea of 100% participation was to help minimize any kind of compromise of anonymity, I won't support this.
I understand. Ms. Smith?
You know, I support this because I recall back in February when we first called for the review, I felt that our purpose was to get some information from an impartial source quickly that we could provide to staff to assist in making some management decisions to address any management issues that came out of the review regarding the police department. The assessment has been that talking with a sample of people would provide the kind of information that could assist with making the kinds of management changes that might be necessary. That it would provide the feedback. Currently, as I see it, we've kind of left our city manager and police department leadership in limbo regarding any kinds of changes that might need to be made because they're waiting for the results of this review that has been undertaken. And it's not fair, in my opinion, to our staff, our police officers, or the people of the community to leave this thing hanging. So I would hope that after the preliminary interviews with this selected group of 20 people, that's the number, that we would have an interim report from MTAS that could be provided to management to move forward with some action that I frankly thought we would have had by about a month ago when we started this effort. We need to do that. So I strongly support taking this approach, allowing them to talk with a sample and give us a report after that, I would hope.
Mr. Hensley?
Yeah, I don't think I didn't hear a preliminary report included in this discussion, but having done some statistical work in my former job, I can see where you might take a statistical sampling and set up a matrix that then allows you to ask the right questions of everybody else. Because on the front end, you don't really know where it's going to go, but if you did a good statistical sampling, then you'd have this, at least somewhat of a guide that allows you to talk to everybody and get the right information.
Mr. Chin?
Is an interim report part of the proposal from MTAS?
It is not, as I understand it, it is not the language that's in the amendment that I proposed.
So an interim report will not be provided by MTAS if we go forward with this?
At this point, that's correct.
That's not part of their initial
It
proposal?
is not.
Okay.
Ms. Ball?
In response to Ms. Smith's comments about Mr. Watson, city manager, having to wait, he doesn't have to wait for us for anything. In fact, had he chosen to investigate these issues early on when he was encouraged to do so, we probably wouldn't be here right now.
Mr. Callison?
Because we've expanded the pool considerably, it's clear that the final report, if we just wait till it's done, will be delayed considerably. And one of the things we kept talking about is trying to make sure we resolve this as soon as possible. I see this as whether or not it's a full report, I think they'll be able to give us some feedback about what they're finding. And if there are some obvious issues right away that they've identified, we can attack those while we wait for the whole report. So this makes sense. The question is, do we need to add a couple of words that say that they'll give us some feedback to let us know how it's going?
I saw that was later.
I guess you could do it either way in terms of amending the proposed amendment by adding language, or simply adding a sixth paragraph. Whatever your pleasure is. Mr. Hope?
I guess I'm still trying to understand why we do the random sampling of the 20 of the whole group. Other than if it's for MTAS's sake to set a baseline for the interview process. In other words, does the interview process need to be tweaked or looked at that point? I think we need to, if it's not worded in here, that we get some type of internal type of report back to us, whether it's just for our own sake on city council, whether this is sent forward to city manager or police department leadership could be determined, but it's certainly something that we would like to have some feedback on. If they're getting feedback from this random sample, I think it'd be very important for us to get that feedback as well.
Ms. Smith?
Yes, as I see it, this report is intended to come to council, not to come to the folks who work for us. We're requesting a report. It's not a report for the manager. I would like to, given the concern that if we want an interim report that needs to be added, I'd prefer to make that a separate amendment so that we can consider these items separately.
I believe this is a point of order issue. There's nothing on the floor right now about reports. There's only an amendment on the floor, correct?
There's an amendment on the floor. And
It's not about
discussion-
reports.
I'm
and a
stating my
discussion about
intent. I'm
Sorry,
stating my
point of
intent
order.
to make, thank you for wanting to run our meeting, Ms. Mansfield. I was stating my intent to make an amendment later after we've had this discussion, but I see that as something that I would ask for consistent with this request for the small interview pool. That gives us an opportunity to request an interim report, and I believe that would be useful for us.
Can anybody else speak?
When we're concluded with it, we'll come to the audience, Ms. Mansfield. Mr. Callison?
I'm just procedurally, I'm not sure which way would be easiest to just amend what you're proposing. And it would be to give us a snapshot, quick snapshot of what they found in the initial random sample.
Why don't you, I have no objection to that language if you want to propose an amendment to the amendment.
I propose an amendment to the amendment to add that they will provide us with a snapshot of what they found at that point.
Second. There is one primary amendment on the floor, and this would amend the primary amendment. So, okay. All right, so the discussion will be on the amendment to the primary amendment, and that is to receive an interim report upon completion of the random interviews. Mr. Chin.
Do we have any kind of idea of what kind of cost this will add to the procedure? I mean, we're going to have to go back and amend our request to them. Providing a preliminary report is additional work in addition to what they've said they're going to provide to us. We've already cut it $3,500. Is this going to add? In your discussion, have you discussed anything about this? Do you have any feel of how much this is going to add to our proposal?
No, as you'll see in the information provided, they have allotted 1 hour of interview time for each interview. They are also, as I understand it, going to credit us for 60 hours of time that they did not use related to the original proposal.
But that's included in the $2,600 proposal. Or the $26,000.
Yes.
Those 60 hours
Yes.
are already given with the $26,000 estimate.
In other words, they would not start charging the additional time until they had used the 60 hours.
But it's possible they could get into this and this require a lot of additional time, and the actual cost of this investigation, review, whatever we call it, could be significantly more than $26,000 or $22,700 as it is now.
Well, it's their charges will be, as proposed, would be $50 an hour.
But there's not a cap to this.
At this point, there's not a cap.
Excuse me, I have another question about point of order.
Well,
Is
when
it not- is it okay?
we finish our discussion, Ms. Mansfield, I will call on you. You came up first.
I know
At
this is
at
point
this
of order.
point, but you don't have any standing at this point to raise a point of order. Point of order is for the council. I will call on you as soon as council has finished its discussion on this particular amendment.
Do you serve as parliamentarian?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Mr. Watson.
Mayor and Council, I just wanted to say it's not unusual in the case of a report, we're using a consultant to have a progress report, and it would sound like the sampling might be a perfect point for a progress report. You've established the mayor as the point of communication on that, and you could utilize that as part of your process.
Thank you. Mr. Hensley.
Yeah, you know, we're up here discussing $3,500 and $26,000, and I shudder to think how much money's been spent by our city staff dealing with this issue since January. Mark, do you have a feel for anything like that? I mean, you start looking at the city attorney reviewing FOIRs and the city staff providing information and the research that has to be done to answer all the questions that have come up on this thing. Do you have a feel for how much staff time has been essentially wasted on this issue?
I would say that the staff time has grown from the beginning of this process. Initially, it was council implementation process, and as we have gone through special meetings and additional preparation of information, that commitment of time and resources has grown, and we don't have the study started if that's going to be done.
I'm looking for a feel for relative to the 26,000. Is it
Mr. Hensley, now I've given you some latitude here, but that's not directly related to the amendment. Ms. Ball.
I bet it's not as much as we've lost in the turnover. Just to remind you, we've lost 5 more officers in the last 4 months.
All right, further comments or discussion by council. Mr. Carlson, would you repeat your motion?
I would ask that the consultants create what I would call a snapshot, which is just a quick summary of what they have heard in the random interviews. And in particular, what we would be looking for is if there's something very troublesome that they found, we'd like to be able to take some action on that as soon as possible. So that's more background. So it's a snapshot of what they've heard and any major issues they think we should be aware of.
And that amendment was seconded by Mr. Hensley. Okay.
My concern about a preliminary report, kind of like maybe, I don't know, cheating on a test. There's some comparison